Welcome to Abstract Curiosity Podcast, your go-to spot for those eager to explore the world with a curious eye. I'm Rebeka, a 1-3 mental projector.
I'm Michelle, a 4-1 emotional generator. Come join us because life is an adventure and sometimes we just need a funky new roadmap to navigate our way through this wild world. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our podcast, Abstract Curiosity. My name is Rebeka. I'm a 1-3 mental projector, Virgo Sun, Capricorn Moon, and Capricorn Rising.
Oh, she's so fluid with it. Hey, I'm Michelle. I am a 4-1 emotional generator, Scorpio Sun, Aquarius Moon, and Rising in Cancer.
I love it. You're getting so smooth on it. And if anybody is
I'm
brand,
getting
you're getting it. If anybody is brand new to us today, we like to introduce ourselves like that so that you can just understand the filter through which we see the world and connect to us a little bit more in that way. It just helps us because me as a mental projector, I'm going to do and experience things a little differently than Michelle as a 4-1 generator. It's just how it is.
True. Very true in that, which is cool, which is what makes the world go round, right? Everybody's going to have a different way of perspecting, looking at things. That's very cool. Yay.
Exactly. And if you're anything like me, like I used to try so hard to be like right or normal and like try to be like everybody else because that's what you're supposed to do. And this has just helped me understand, like, we're all so different. So like if you don't need to compare yourselves to us. You can just enjoy our experience and learn from it. Absolutely.
Love it.
Yay.
What are we going to do today, Miss Rebeka?
So we are continuing our series. Last time we talked about the Saturn return, right? The big moment in life everybody experiences around 27 to 30-ish. So today we're going to dig into the Uranus opposition, which is our next phase. And this is a good one because I really didn't know anything about it, but I am currently smack in the middle of it. So we get that experience, and then you have some stories from your Uranus opposition as well. So we're just going to dig into that. Tell us what is the Uranus opposition? Like what's
okay.
happening?
Yeah. So the Uranus opposition is really, I mean, in layman terms, midlife crisis is what most people would call it, right? But that was typically, it's interesting because typically that was attributed to men. Midlife crisis was a lot of the times attributed to men and what their behaviors were, right? However, in our evolved consciousness of women and understanding that we all go through these trip ups, we first have to start off with the idea of what Uranus is, right? Because we're talking about its opposition. So what that means is Uranus is all about shock and surprises, but it's also about seeking freedom. It's about finding the people who believe and understand what it is that you want. It's about individuality. Like, who am I? Independent of everybody else. Have I followed what it is that I desire that works really well for me? Now, the cool part is that during this Uranus opposition means it's like a quick pause of, are you kind of following the way that you really came here to follow? Are you in the relationship you're supposed to be in? A lot of the times it has to do with relationships because that's what Uranus is about. Uranus is about who it is you're hanging out with, who is your community, who is it that you strive to be like, who is it that you want to help, and again, you being helped yourself. And it's always seeking freedom, like freedom to be and wave that independent flag of, this is actually who I am. Because you think about, you go through your Saturn return, right? And Saturn return's all about, are you following the rules that you came here to follow? Then you go on, right, in your 30s and into the beginning of your 40s, and you're like, for a lot of people, they're in their career. If you've decided to have children, most people have decided whether they're going to have children or not have children during this phase between these two transits. And then all of a sudden Uranus happens and it's like, oh, I'm looking at myself as an individual again. Oh, what does that look like? Who am I supposed to be? What relationships am I supposed to have? What career path do I want to look at? So it's kind of like you start to question your own potential. Am I living up to my potential?
Question your own potential. That just
unlocked.
Yes.
Oh, girl. Okay. And I love it because you're going through it. What did that hit for you?
It
as I
just
drink my
felt
coffee.
so expansive where
Mm.
it's like it just felt like a magic box, like the lid had been opened. It's like, are you really letting all this magic shine in the world? Like, stop hiding it. That's
Uh,
just the image that I got.
oh, I love that because that's what Uranus is. I mean, Uranus really is about technology and it's really about what's beyond technology. It's beyond, and like you said, it's that felt limitless. I freaking love that because within the Uranus energy, there is that galactic connection, whether it's
Mhm.
stars, whether it's God, whether it's other beings from other planets, if you believe that there is existence other places. And that's expansive.
It is. That's so expansive.
That's expansive.
Well, and it just makes me think. I was just talking to my
Mm,
brother about this yesterday about he made a comment about being in the early 20s. He's like, I wouldn't go back there. He just turned 40 a couple months ago. I was like, isn't it funny how we've been lied to our whole time? Like everybody would talk about how you reach 40 and life is over and you're just old and you might as well, like you're over the hill. Like it just go away. But really, life begins at 40, it feels like. It's like you're
mhm.
finally over all the BS and trying to please everybody, and you're really stepping into who you are. So that sounds like what you're describing. It's just really unlocking that. And it's like, okay, stop trying to appease everybody. It's time for
Yeah,
your magic, like you. Yeah.
I love that. Your magic, because it's your authenticity that you're looking for. If you haven't reached your authenticity in your 40s, is when the disruption really happens. Like, oh, I don't
Mm,
feel authentic. Mhm.
yes. And I think that that helped
I
me
gotta write that
a
down.
lot in this past year.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely been going through that. And so I think meeting you, and then I remember when you were looking at my chart because I was just talking about stuff and you're like, well, let's dig in. And then you're like, oh, right, Uranus opposition. And that just helped me to
Yeah.
understand what was happening.
And it's a big deal. What I think is interesting is usually right before we go on to do a podcast, I have something crop up, right? That's going to
Mhm.
hit what we're talking about. So I had somebody in my office last week, 2.5 hour session. She's in
Mhm.
her Uranus opposition, like dead center in the middle of it. And so it was interesting because a lot of the times people are really questioning, for some people, they're questioning, am I really living authentically in every aspect of my life? And for some people, it's like, well, I have, and for her example would be, part of her story is, and I matched this story, which was I'm in a career. I've invested a lot of time, money, and management in it. I'm known for this, right? So there's a lot of attachments that happen by the time you're age 42.
Oh, yeah.
And all of a sudden she's looking at it and saying, I don't even think I like this anymore. But
Mm.
what do I do with that? Especially when you're talking about pensions and you're talking about, we all get really attached to this idea of safety as we get older. Do I
Mhm.
have enough money? And it's the first time when you're in your 40s that you start to say, oh my gosh, I'm no longer in the younger category. I am now a full adults. And that's a scary thing. I think when you hit your 50s and Chiron return, then you really start thinking, how many years do I have left? Right.
Right.
Oh, I've got like 30 years, plenty of time. Right. But I think every 10 years you cycle through that. But I think it's interesting because I think sometimes that's what happens. And that's why I personally feel Uranus opposition could be the toughest one because you're no longer a kid, you're
Mhm.
an adult and you're like, shit, there's a big shift in like who and what I'm experiencing. But how are people going to perceive me? Because
Mhm.
judgment is always the big reason why we don't do stuff.
Mhm.
How are people going to think about me? What are they going to say about me? What are my clients? What are my customers? What's my spouse? What are my children? Like all of the things bubble up. But inside, you're like, oh, but if I could just do this, there's a peace in that. And there's my authentic voice, but it looks so different. Does any of that resonate with you right now?
Absolutely. Yes. It's so weird. Well, and it's interesting to me that for mine, it coincides with my boys essentially flying the nest, right? Like, I'm in the middle of it right now, and my youngest is about to be a senior in high school, so he's very independent. So everything I've been doing the past 20 years, really focusing on being a mom and my kids' mental
Mhm.
and physical well-being is essentially done. I mean, obviously it's never done as a mom, but I they don't need me full time anymore. And it's time for me
Yeah.
to have a career, and so it's weird because I never got to have that career like I wanted, but now it feels like there's space for that and I can finally start figuring that out and making the money and doing the thing, but it just requires me to be different than what I've
Yeah.
been. So yeah, that definitely resonates, and it's interesting with like just the shift because even some of the work I started doing, like the virtual assistant work a month ago, I never would have guessed. I never would have been like, oh, I'm going to build this business. So
Surprise.
yeah,
Right?
right.
Good old Uranus. It will surprise you in good ways and in bad ways. It's like surprise. Like, yeah. Okay. Do we want to pull up charts really quick and just take a look at it or no?
Oh,
What are you
sure.
comfortable with?
Why not? Um, I just happen to have yours up, but
Oh, cool. Yeah, we can look at mine too.
okay, sweet.
All
Uh,
right. Let's do
Here's
Uranus
mine,
opposition.
I guess, just because, like I said, okay, look, the cycle date, 24 July 2024. So in July, I'm so curious what that day will feel like before and after, if there's going to be
Yeah.
some shift or something. But so, yeah,
Yeah,
right in the middle
exactly.
of it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm curious if you know, real quick, with this date, is that like when Uranus is like exactly opposite? It's like we've hit it, and then
Yes.
after that, we're moving
Yeah.
out. Okay, so that's
Yeah.
like the peak day.
So it's the peak day. So obviously you've been feeling it for a little while. And to be honest, I think for everybody it ranges differently
Mm.
of how long you feel it for. But usually you can go a year or a year forward and a year backwards, and you kind of have your summary of the most intense part for it, um, for the Uranus opposition.
That makes
Um,
sense, especially because the planet's so far away, so we feel the effects for a while.
Absolutely. And I think that's the important part of any of these things is that especially for people who are really highly sensitive, like you think about the moon, like the moon cycles, the full moon and the new moon, they always say it's 3 days before, 3 days after. So it's
Mm.
kind of almost like a 7 day cycle, right? 3 days before, then the moon, and then 3 days afterwards, you're feeling it. And for me, a lot of times I feel it a little bit even further out when I research it, like, oh gosh, yeah, that's and I do it more on the full moon than the new moon. And again, I think some of that has to do with when you were born, like where
Hmm.
was the moon cycle for you when you were born, because probably it's either the opposite that you're more sensitive to, or maybe the if you were born like with a crescent moon, then maybe you're going to be a little bit more sensitive to the full moon. So I mean, it all just it kind of
Oh,
depends, but I truly believe that. And we talk about it in astrology, we talk about the orbs, orb of energy or orbs of light. And so it's kind of like anything that hits the moon, it's 10 degrees, but on planets it's usually 3 degrees. So that's why I would say with the Uranus oppositions, I would say a year before and a year after. But again, I'm sure there's some expert out there that would probably tell us something different, but that's what I've seen with my clients for years. So your
okay.
Uranus opposition, how has it been showing up for you? What has been, so let me ask you this. Has there been something that you're experiencing that you weren't living authentically? Was there anything that you were feeling, God, I'm just not being authentic with who I am, or who am I?
Yeah, like with my entire life.
Oh, okay. Do you mind sharing a little bit?
Yeah, it just, I mean, it literally felt like everything. So I guess if I start like a year ago, I had just finished
Mm-hmm.
this long-term sub position where I mean, it was kind of a disaster, but it was a good learning experience. And
Yeah.
after that, I realized I've got to go all in on my business because I don't fit into corporate at all. And so I did my best to do that, but I had burnt myself out by October. So it was like May, I was like, okay, I'm all in. Let's just figure this out. And then by October, I was burnt out. And I realized that I didn't want to do anything that I had been doing in my business, that it just felt exhausting. I just felt like I was doing it because I thought I was supposed to. Like this is how you build a business. And I wasn't pricing myself well. Like there was all it was just everything. And so I kind of shut down. I tried a membership thing where I taught about human design, and there was a lot of good in that. But then I burnt myself out with that one as well. Like when March came around, I was burnt out. And that's when I had to really get honest and just sit with myself, like, what is happening? Because I don't
Yeah.
get sick that often. And so for me to be sick twice in a year and for them to, this sickness
Mm,
and this burnt out to be coincided with the eclipses, with both eclipses, I'm like, something's happening. And so
yeah.
I just got real honest, realized like every decision I made has basically been because I thought I was supposed to, or, trying to please somebody else or just fit in with the mold. And I didn't know what I wanted or who I was. And I started realizing that I could be autistic. Like I started doing research on that. And so I reached out to some professionals, and I haven't been officially diagnosed, but it's been enough to say, yes, that's happening as well. And so just the idea that at 42 years old, I'm just figuring out that I've been autistic and probably ADHD my entire life has been, I mean, really freeing, but
Ah.
also a little weird, right? I'm like, because I look back and I think, oh my gosh, okay, this makes sense. Like, this is why I didn't like this or that or whatever. And it just makes everything make so much sense. And luckily, I haven't felt like I've been grieving anything. I just feel grateful to know it now. But it is weird to get to 42 and just realize this huge thing about yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's that's the interesting part of it, you know. We've had all these responsibilities to show up for everybody else. And now it's like you said, like your phase is a little different because you had your kids at a younger age. So you're already feeling that like, oh, the kids are leaving. Now it's my time to focus on me.
Hmm.
But I love it when you said it was like finding out that possibly could be neurodivergent, could be ADD, and probably the thing that you've beaten yourself up about your whole life. I don't know. Is it?
Well,
I mean,
with
are there
certain
thoughts and
things,
ideas?
yeah, when I
Yeah.
think about like socially, where I remember,
Yeah.
I know there's times like when I'm one on one, like I feel like I've just sometimes I meet people like you where it's like just like an instant soul connection and everything's great and it's awesome. But then sometimes I'm in like a group, like I remember being at school or if I'm in a large group of something and I just cannot talk. I'm just like on the outside and it just feels so awkward. Um, so it's like certain things like that and just there's been a lot of realizations thinking back on it.
Yeah. And again, you're in the middle of it. And so
Yes.
sometimes the reflection can't come till even later. But I love the fact that you are so cognizant of it. And I think, and that's the cool part. Like, I'm loving hearing how you're evolving through this and the awareness and what you're learning because there's surprise after surprise with this. Like, there isn't like
Yes.
just like one surprise. There's like this Uranus opposition at times can bring in so many different elements, right? Like, I mean, you think about the word being authentic and or like questioning your own potential. That alone is in every aspect of your life. So, that's why you do see people like sometimes moving again. Some
Mm,
people like saying this relationship isn't working for me, or my relationship with myself isn't working, or my partnership isn't working. Because you think about it, Uranus really does want to make connections with people. it
mm,
wants to it wants to establish that, but sometimes it's not with those that you are currently with. It no longer works for you. So you're like, how do I do this? Yeah, in the middle of your life, like, holy crap, I got to make a pivot. So it's one that I see that if you have a friend that's in their 40s and you see that they're in a really kind of a questionable space and they're struggling, like, just, you don't have to look at somebody's chart, just freaking support them through it. Ask
Right.
them really good questions, right? And we know that, as a projector, your questions look different than what my questions as a generator, right? And you're a mental projector, right? And so a lot of the times I'm always kind of like, what are you feeling about this? Because you're so open. I mean, people can look at the left hand side of your chart. Rebeka's
Yeah.
really open. So all of the emotions, all the empathy, the highly, being all of those things is her jam. But giving her questions that can help her go into that, right? Giving her the safety, that looks different than like how a generator is going to go through her Uranus opposition, which for me would be finite yes and no questions that I could fire off and like, oh, that's what it is. Okay. And that's why sometimes I think with generators too, probably like with all energy types, talking through something helps us gain the clarity of it
Hmm.
instead of holding it in sometimes. Yeah.
Yes. Well, especially with your emotional authority, right?
Yeah, and again, I was just telling somebody else the other day, like my emotional authority, because my waves are really deep, and I'm a triple split. I really do find that it takes a while for me to really hone in on what my emotions are and how
Hmm.
to make a decision. But usually because of the way, in fact, you can flip up my chart if you want, usually because my emotional waves are the 4130. And if you know human design, that just means yeah, right down there, that uh usually my waves happen because something hasn't happened. I had an expectation and it wasn't met, and that's usually when my wave is instigated. So I have to make sure that I'm not in that moment with it all. Okay, my opposition was
Mm.
when
2012.
2012. Oh,
Yeah.
Jiminy Crickets, Grasshopper George. Can I tell you? Um, oh.
Sorry. I love your phrases.
Oy vey. Okay, so let's unpack that baby. Ooh, that was one of the most intense years of my life. So I'm looking at it from a reversal mode. I've been through it. I am now, I don't even know how old am I? Am I 54? I might be 54. I might be 53. I'm not. Oh, it says right over there, I'm 54. Okay.
Yes.
So this was exactly 12 years ago
Hmm.
in May, which is why I've been a little apprehensive a little bit about all the other news going on with the astrology, because I like look back 12 years. I'm like, oh, it was not a good year for me. Okay.
Yes.
So in 2012, my husband had to have open heart surgery, and it wasn't until the fall of 2012. And it was a shock. He was only in his 50s, and his widowmaker was closed 90%, no,
Mm.
95%. And he had three other ones major closed. So they went in to do stints, came out, and the doctor looked at me. He said he has to have open heart surgery. So my whole world kind of went into a swirl. I then was also still a sales rep for a fabric company, and that went bye bye. And
Mm.
then after my husband's surgery, he had to leave and go to California 2 weeks out of every month right after his surgery. It was, my kids were in middle school, and I was really sitting in, who the bleep am I?
Yeah.
Who are my friends? What am I doing with my life? And it got abruptly taken from me. So my career as a sales rep got ripped out of me. I want to say it might have been May. I'm cracking up at that because I think it was
Wow.
before. Was it before or was it in 2013? Anyways, it was right around this point, that my boss had been complaining that I never reached out to him with questions. He was a new boss. And I was really miserable in my job. I hated it. I had cried the year before to my husband saying, I can't believe I make this kind of money doing this. And he looks at me and goes, why is that a bad thing? I said, because my soul's not in this job. And in that
Mm.
instant, my sales took a tank. Tank. Then I emailed my boss a question. I thought, okay, I got to play the game because I was still in the corporate world. I had my private practice, but I had my corporate job. So I emailed my boss, but I emailed him from my private business, which they didn't know about.
Oh no.
Yes. And then the call came in. My husband was in California. And I got the call and they said, we no longer need your services. And I found out why, because he found out I had another job. He was just looking for a way to get rid of me. And that was the way he got rid of me. And the universe was pivoting me towards that because it wasn't in alignment with who I was. But talk about a shock. I
Yes.
was a major part of the breadwinning. My husband made money, but I made double what he made. And my whole world shifted in an instant. Um, and it's
Okay.
funny because now that I'm thinking about, oh yeah, go ahead. Go,
Now I'm
go.
just thinking when that email, like that wasn't an accident. Like that's what
No.
but I mean, obviously it was, but like at a deeper level, it was not. It's so interesting looking back because I know at the time it was devastating. I can only imagine
Oh,
how
oh,
terrified you were. But then also,
oh.
were you relieved too? Were you kind of confused because you're like, I should be more upset, but I'm also kind of happy? Like, how did you feel?
I would say because I still had kids at a young age, I was freaking out. I
Mm.
wasn't as stable in my spirituality. I mean, I was into it, definitely
Mhm.
into it, but I was also still a newbie and I didn't really have anybody like looking, like I didn't have anybody looking at my charts or guiding me on all of it. So no, I was shitting myself. And the relief came, what I would say is the relief came. Oh, isn't that interesting, Rebeka? Look at the Uranus opposition. Look at my variables. They're all rights.
Mhm. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm
that's
noticing that.
interesting. Anyways, the only relief was I felt like I had permission to do what I really wanted to do, which was this
Mm.
work.
Mm.
Unfortunately, because my husband had just been through his probably Chiron, near his Chiron, his whole health issue, because we're about 10 years apart. Um, I didn't feel like I felt like I could do it, but I was a very naive entrepreneur. I thought
Yes.
if I put my shingles out there, people would just come running. I didn't realize all of the work that would entail. So I would
Yeah.
get frustrated really quickly on, okay, where's my group? Where's my tribe? Which I found. I found my group. I found my voice. I found my authentic self. But because I have an open, if you want to point that at him, oh, maybe I can. I don't, can you see my? No, yeah, there it is. I have an open. It's the only area that's open for me. So it gets hit
Mhm.
a lot. My struggle of self assurance was devastated. And I didn't feel like I had the support to do it. The rules
Mm.
in my marriage still hadn't broken apart that it was safe for me to do this. It didn't feel safe for me to do this. And I had to be successful really, really quickly.
Which puts so much
Um,
pressure on it. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Anybody doing a small business, an entrepreneurship, like yeah, you gotta know that your partner's behind you because boy, that can be a big struggle. He wanted to be behind me, but he didn't know how to be it because I was a major breadwinner. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was a big shift, but it kicked me out because I wasn't in alignment with my authentic self. And I knew that and I spoke it. I
You
spoke it
did.
aloud.
Oh, which is this is what's interesting, like when you start getting into this work and then you look back on it. And of course, because I'm not emotionally invested, I can look at him like, oh yeah, like you spoke it and then you sent the email and then it have like your spirit was in control. Um, but gosh, I can't imagine how terrifying it was at the time. So I think that's just important
Yeah.
for people to know, like for me right now, since I'm in the midst of it, like there's a lot yet to be unpacked and everything.
Mhm.
So like it's okay to feel a lot of things. I mean, like you said, it's surprises, it's all kinds of stuff. and it'll make sense later, but
In the moment, it's difficult. It is. And I think you have to have grace and you have to have patience, and you really should have a good network behind you during it. Somebody who really understands and can be compassionate about it. It's interesting because mine happens. You want to show where it's at. My gates are 18 and 46 on my general side. Like my Uranus is
oh,
1846
over here.
over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
18 and 46. Yeah. So
So tell me about that a little bit. Like with 18.
18. Oh, yeah. So that's part of the channel of judgment. So that's really, oh, I don't have my little cards. Um, knowing,
It's in the logical circuitry. You can kind of see
yeah, it's
it,
part of the
I've
collective. It's part of, when I think about judgment, here we go. I think about how it's really integrity. It's like knowing how to keep systems in integrity, like how to keep systems safe, like judging if it's correct or not. But that
right.
that
Okay.
correction, it's like, okay, so it's a pattern that needs correction in that 18. That's its awareness that it has. It's looking at patterns. It knows if I fix this and I fix that, then this will run smoothly, which is really
Mm,
important. But you can put it in on yourself, and that's when things get a little detrimental. If you're looking at yourself and saying, um, I'm wrong, or here's something I'm doing that's wrong or bad, that's not what it's for. It's a collective. It's a looking out. So you're looking at this system. Like the good thing about it is you looking at this system of like the job that you were doing and like this, no, like I am judging this not stable.
yes. Yeah. And I like that. That's why I wanted you to look at that for us, because I think that in that tells me a lot. Now, of course, we can look at where Uranus was during my opposition, which was 17, which is hysterical because 17 is one of my Chirons.
Oh, so that
I don't
makes
think
it. I didn't even think about that. Yes. We'll have to go back and look at mine in a second too, because yeah, that gate of opinions.
it's
So
it's both. Rebeka, look, it's both 17 and 25. Exactly my
yes.
Chirons.
Yes.
Flip over to yours. Did we just discover something? Oh,
Well, I know that there was a long time when Uranus was opposing Chiron in the transit. So whoever was born for like
right.
a long time, like that's going to happen. So it makes sense. So
23 for you, though. It's there.
yeah, there's the
Look at
23
that.
is like right on the edge. Um,
That's, okay, that's interesting.
yeah.
It almost feels like it was a precursor of what's coming up. And isn't that interesting? We've talked about Saturn.
Mm.
We're doing the Uranus opposition. And then we always say, what's the other big transition right now? And again, we need to go further than the 50s. We're not dead after 50, by the way. We still have
Right.
another Saturn return in our 60s. If you hit your 80s, you're going to hit your Uranus um, uh, uh,
Return.
return. Yeah. So like this, but we're talking about the things that most people talk about. So this is interesting. I really wonder how much of a precursor. I love that we're just still discovering shit on this. This is amazing.
Yes. Always discovering. That's why this work is so fun.
It is so fun because I think about the idea of like, okay, so that all got wiped away from me, right? I had to figure out like, who am I? Where is my authentic voice? Like, what, you know, have I really hit my potential and things? I'm like, no, this isn't even in the field I should be in. And I realized that. But 17 is, your
Opinion.
opinions without fact, right? It's just opinions. And it's kind of like that's the thing that I'm always apologizing for when I give an opinion, because that's my Chiron, but it also hit my Uranus opposition. And oh, will you flip back to my chart real quick?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry. Um, and then 25 is spirituality, which was what I was diving into at the time. And I felt like I had made some big pivots. I was reading and studying. I mean, I was studying a ton of modalities in 2012, like a ton. I probably was doing faster EFT actually at that time, and using that on my clients for trauma release.
Mm.
And isn't that interesting? But I didn't still have the confidence that I could really do this on my own because gate five, I have gate five. You want to show them where that's at? Gate five is in the solar plexus, and gate five is routine. And that's in my Mars. Anyways, gate five for me got really erupted, which is what is my routine? It was the biggest thing I struggled with. So from 9 to 5, like after I lost my job and I tried to make this business a go full time at the beginning, um, not having a routine was probably my biggest hang up because at 5 o'clock, I felt like I could breathe. But from 9 to 5, my whole system was in um, fight or flight.
Mm. That totally makes
Yeah.
sense because that's what's ingrained in us. Like you have to
Yeah.
work during this time and show up and do things in order
Yes.
to prove that you're valuable. Prove, prove, prove.
Yes.
And then with your combo
Yes.
chart, like again, the heart's the only one open. Everything else is defined. So there really is so many lessons happening inside of there, which you pointed out before. But just the fact that this is the only one open is really fascinating to me too. Like all the lessons happening.
So on the happy note, because when you go through it, sometimes it's very uncomfortable, but the happy note is that, yeah, this is what I do.
Yeah.
It was scary. It was scary. And there definitely was times that I had to learn how to budget differently. And I really had to own my money. I had a lot of money fears at a lot of money fears at
Mm.
42. And I had to work through that. I had to figure out how I was going to make a go of things, how I was going to get my kids through college now. Like all of those things came up. Um, Probably, what did I learn? Yeah, I think it was the beginning of learning that when I really lean into my unique set of experiences, and by the way, I didn't know human design yet at this point, um, that things come to me. But I was the resistance to the things coming to me because I was sitting in fear and most of the time
Hmm.
because my partner was sitting in fear most of the time. He couldn't support me in the way that I thought. And again, this is just me, how I thought it could be. But oh my gosh, had that not happened,
Who
oh,
knows?
yeah, I shudder to think. Like the experience made me who I am today.
Yes. Yes. And it's interesting that you were talking about the money fears in the 40s. That might be another good topic because I think, I mean, it's a lot that I'm going through as well. And it seems like one of the society things is like, well, you should have everything figured out by the time you're 40, of course, because people think they need to have it figured out by the time they're 30. I talked to so many 30-year-olds who are freaking out, like, no, you're a baby, it's fine. But the other thing, I know in one of the lectures, Raw talked about that astrologically, you're basically a
Mhm.
child until the Uranus opposition. Like that's when it really flips over to adulthood. Like you're so
Okay.
essentially like it's fine. Like you're just kind of playing around with life and figuring stuff out until that 42, that Uranus opposition. It's like now you can step into that authenticity. Now you can step into adulthood. Now you can step into who you're meant to be and start taking charge. But how do you feel about that?
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think it's when life begins. And I love how he said that. It really does, because it is like you've had all of these experiences, but we get caught up in bringing these experiences with us that don't serve us. And this Uranus opposition says you got to look at that. Like, what are
Mhm.
you holding on to that isn't working really well? You know what I mean? And be okay with letting it go. And I love it because I mean, even how much the world has changed in 12 years when this
Oh
happened to
my
me
gosh,
is
yes.
substantial. Like even the internet, like all the information we have, it wasn't as proficient as it is now. And
Mm.
so I needed to learn patience, and that is part of my whole dharma too, is like I have to learn how to be patient, and I have to learn to hold myself or find people who can hold me, and because of that open ego center for myself, like I
Mhm.
really have to have somebody to encourage me when I falter. And I really did discover that in my 40s. And I found friendships that wouldn't give me play the sob story with me. They would champion me through it. And they would say, but you're really good at this. So don't falter in it. I'm like, oh, thank you. My psyche just needed to hear that. I just needed someone to tell me that. And then I could move on. Right. Do you feel that too when you're going through this?
Yes, yes, I'm so glad you said that because
Mm,
finding that support system, that's been a huge part of this past year too, of really seeing who I can lean on, who I can't, and allowing myself to be supported. That's the whole other thing, where I've been a single mom for so
yes.
long, and I've been so terrified to be a burden like my entire life. And so to finally sit up and say, I kind of need some help in this area, or can I get support in this area? Because um I I was gonna say, you were going through this and you had a partner, and like that's
Mhm,
so the part of me, like the single part of me is like, well, at least you had a partner there with you. But I mean, it would be so hard. I can only imagine like you're trying this whole brand new thing. You get let go from the job, you're trying this brand new thing. I can totally understand how your husband's like, I'm trying to support you, but I'm terrified and I don't know. And like that can be a
mhm,
whole thing. But then over here to be totally single, it's kind of nice because I don't have anybody's fears holding me back, just my own, but at the same time, I also don't have anybody holding my hand or,
mhm,
cheering me on. And so meeting you, I think, has really helped transition that because there have been times where I've been just like stuck in a bad feeling or just all kinds of stuff since we met, and you just hold the space and it helps move it through. And it's like
mm,
I feel like in the past or with other people or what I'm used to is like people would kind of take it personally when I'd get upset or they feel like they need to fix me real quick. But you let me sit in the feeling, but not in like a martyr way. It's like, okay, what's going on? Okay, let's look at your chart. Oh yeah, here's what's happening. That makes sense. Like feel it out, cry it out, but and then like that's all I need is someone to just like hold me and be like, "Oh yeah, that makes sense. It's okay."
yeah.
So to start to find those people, I feel like that's starting to happen now, which is really nice. So thank you for being that for me.
Oh, you're so sweet. You're so welcome. And thank you for being so open to all of it, because I think that's one of the cool things about our partnership is that we both see, because of what we study, we both see such potential for both of ourselves individually, right? And
Mhm.
yeah, when you understand that somebody's energy, you got to support them in it in the way that's meant for them. Um so I think for anybody who's listening to this who's coming up on it, because I wonder, it's like, oh my gosh, did we scare everybody away?
Mm.
I hope not. Because when you do go through it, although for some people it's pretty smooth, like some people are like, no, and especially younger generations coming up, like you guys have this information in front of you. And it's getting to be more of a normal dialogue, not for everybody, but more so than when we were growing up. And
Absolutely.
so yeah, so parents are kind of like, oh, I need to learn about my kids. So when this stuff comes up, I know how to support them through it, right?
Mhm.
That's the evolution of consciousness, in my opinion, is that if you know better, you have to do better. And so now I know better. Like I think we were talking before, like I know one of my sons is coming up on his Saturn return in about another year, and or 2 years maybe. And I'm like, I'm going to be just consciously aware of that so
Mhm.
that I know how to champion him through it. That's why human design and astrology to me have such potency, because it's not just about reading about it, it's integrating it. What are you
Yes.
learning from it? What has the experience been? What are you feeling you need? These are all questions that we don't normally ask people. What do you feel you need right now? Well, right now I could really use like constant rah rah, like you got this, right? Um, and for everybody going through it, whether you're married, you're divorced, or you've chosen to have kids or not kids, like all of this shows up so differently. But just to understand that it's here to help you get back into alignment with the true soul-based purpose, not what society and mom and dad and schooling has taught you that you have to be.
Mhm.
This is let your freak flag fly, and you're going to have to deal with judgments of yourself and with other people. And and it's going to cause you to learn more about yourself. Either that or people flop back into complete, we've seen this too, right? People flop just completely into misery
Yes, if they don't
because their
wanna face
Uranus.
things.
Yes. Yeah. They stay in the job. That's why they buy the things. That's why, some people have affairs. Some people will buy things. People will, it becomes this extravagant thing thinking, this is the only way I'm going to survive because I
Mhm.
really am miserable underneath this. And I don't know how to express it because I'm scared, especially for men, to pivot your career because still traditionally, for anybody over, I would say 40 and over, your role has been, I have to support my family, even if the women are doing it. That is their dilemma, right? And don't come at me for that, but it is the truth. I think that I'm still
Mhm.
seeing a ton of men who's like, they're so freaking miserable, but they're like, well, I can't do anything else. Like, this is how I bring in money. Like for them, it's
Right.
so steeped. Don't feel, shut that down. And then by their 40s, it's bubbling up if they haven't dealt with it. I mean, it took my husband 10 years, I think, from that for his heart to completely get closed up because he hadn't dealt with what had happened in his
Doesn't that
40s.
make sense? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. It will
Yeah.
manifest physically if you don't deal with it.
Yeah.
I'm a little
Yeah.
intrigued, like, I'm a little curious how this will affect my kid's dad. Just
Mm,
he
yeah.
suppresses a lot of things, so I don't know, just keep an eye out for him, I guess. But
Yeah.
yeah, it will come out, and I agree with you on the societal roles. I feel like they were very ingrained, like, even for me at 22 years old when I was pregnant, and we were still very much in the church, and I felt so much pressure to be a stay-at-home mom, and
Yeah.
at 22 years old, this is what boggles my mind. I was trying to finish school, but at the time, like, I was so hard on myself. I didn't understand how to just get by in school. Like, if I couldn't really dig into it and get the experience, I'm like, I don't so I quit. But there was all these stories, like, you don't want strangers raising your kids if you send them to daycare, right? And you gotta
Yes.
be a godly wife and a godly mom and all of those stories, and I feel like it was still very prevalent, and it's kinda weird looking back even in the early 2000s, like, that was still very prevalent in the early 2000s.
Oh,
It's like,
1000%.
have we not
Thousand
grown up?
percent.
I think it's switching a little bit, but that's gonna be a big one because we put so much pressure on men, and that is something as a boy mom, and I'm sure for you too, I really try to pay attention to that conversation and how we're treating our men and the stories we're telling our men, eh, because that it can be so toxic and so detrimental, and I don't want that for my
Hmm.
boys.
No. Yeah, and pivot. And I think it really does too in your 40s during this opposition, you really start to see because it is this idea of like, who are you? What do I want to be? Am I following my soul's path? Is how do I support myself financially? Because we still live in a financial world. And I think
Mhm.
for a lot of us in the past, it was 30s was trying to keep up with the Joneses in some aspects, right? Yeah. And wouldn't it be cool in future generations where we're like, okay, well, these are the phases we're teaching this in school. These are the phases in life. In fact, you can take off the share if you want, so I can see your beautiful face
Oh,
more.
yeah, I
Um,
forgot we're sharing.
these that's okay. What I think it would be interesting is that in the future, it would be like, okay, kids, like you're going to go through phases in life. So in your 40s, you might have a time where you're going to start to question things like, what do I want to do? So maybe when you're in your 20s, start to save so that maybe you're going to take a year off, right? You're
Mm,
going to take a year off and you're just going to go on this journey of self-discovery in you know what I mean? Like instead of presenting everything about like you got to get through school, and then you got to get through possibly college or a trade. You got to figure out how you're going to support yourself. And then you got to buy the house, or you got to have a house to live in, or you've got to have car, whatever. And of course, that's the drive we have. But I really do see that in the future, all of those discussions are no longer on this streamline. It's like, oh, I know that my kid's going to go through this at this age. I would love, like, as a parent now, knowing to be able to be alive enough and to have enough money that if my kid needed, like, do you need to take a year off? Take a
Yeah.
sabbatical, whatever that looks like in your world. I would love to carry and support you in it. And then when you're done with this, if you have children, I would love you to carry on this tradition. Wouldn't it be cool as wise ones when we get older that we have that capability? But of course, I have not done that, right? I'm just saying that I see in the future we can be training culturally
Yes.
these major pivots that happen instead of this is how it's supposed to be, as in,
Yes.
yeah,
Just putting that shame and
yeah.
the expectation on everybody because, yeah, eh, there is so much. I know I think about that when my kids get older. So wouldn't it be nice if there was a conversation that instead of it's like this midlife crisis and people are going crazy, it's like, oh, it's the midlife transition. How exciting for you. How can we support you? Like you're figuring it out. Or if we're having conversations before this, if you're thinking when your kid is 5 and you're like, okay, I'm thinking of their Saturn return, I'm all of this stuff in their lifetime, then you're kind of preparing them for that. And so then maybe the transition isn't so bad because they've lived
Mhm,
authentically. You've given them that
mhm.
support to live authentically. Why are we
Yes,
not doing that for our kids?
yeah, because it's not taught. And that's the whole thing. And that's why we do these type of podcasts. That's why we're called the abstract curiosity, because we are curious about how things can change for the global, for the good, so that it doesn't feel like it did for me in my 40s. I mean, this pretty
Yes.
much took me out, but it was because I also didn't have the support, but I found the support afterwards. In fact, after that, a year after that, I put on a women's conference, came out of the blue,
Oh.
and people rallied. I had people donating money for it. And it was all about this stuff. So
Mhm.
it was kind of like my intro into, are you ready to really do this? Right. So that's exciting. That's when I really felt like my spiritual family grew exponentially. I had been building on it here in PA, but that's when it exploded because I felt like this is my chance. This is my opportunity. I'm not going to blow it. Yeah.
Love it.
Interesting. Mm.
So cool.
So, do we have any encouraging words for anybody else that might be going through this right now?
I always want to say trust the process,
Yeah, girl.
which I
Trust the
know it's so
process.
hard and it's so scary when there's like just a couple months ago, I was crying. So I'm like, how am I going to support myself? How am I going to do this? I can't do another 40 years of this. This is insane. Like it's like, what are you talking
Right?
about? And so, but the moment that I really moved into the trust and into the acceptance and into the excitement, it's like, um, how they say that anxiety and excitement is the same frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you can sit with that anxiety and allow it to shift into excitement, then it really starts to
Mm-hmm.
shift your perspective as well. And I started finding the support that I needed and getting the care that I needed for myself, and that helped as well. So just trusting and being with it, being present with it.
Mm. That's good advice. I love it.
What about you? Anything on your mind? Any positive words of encouragement?
I love how you said trust the process because the surprises are not meant to, I don't think there's anything in the world that's meant to tear you up. I think that the surprises that Uranus always gives us is potential for growth. And when we look at boo boos, when we look at shifts or changes, like you said, the anxiousness to that, that was a great example. I would also say to ask yourself a better question. What am I learning from this? Instead of why is this happening to me? Is what am I learning from this? Ooh, because in learning, and of course I've got the one line, right? I'm a teacher learner, but truly when you learn, and whenever I ask the question to clients, like, what are you learning through this? They're like, sometimes they're like, I don't know. And I'm like, I think you do. And I'm like, well, I'm learning that the truth is I don't want to do this. I'm like, and doesn't that feel scary? It's like, that feels really
Yes.
scary. Like, yeah, let's just sit with that scariness, because truly it's the emotion of it that's driving you, and it's driving you to like want to push it under the rug. So let's not push it under the rug. What if you face it head on? And I truly do believe, and it's going to be interesting to ask you the same questions in a couple of years. Like, let's remember that. Like, let's ask you the questions, like, what did you learn? Like, through the whole thing, what did you learn? Because my feeling is, if you're working with somebody through your Uranus opposition, it will be a lot more gentle and smooth than if you are just trying to bear and grin it and push yourself through it. That's the old way.
Yes.
There's too much free information on the internet that will help you, right? Or find a
Yes.
therapist or find a coach or whatever. So that's what I would say. Get somebody who's going to support you through it and going to help you face it and not hide under it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That community aspect. Like, stop being so stubborn. You don't have to do everything by yourself. I know I've needed to learn that lesson all the
Yes.
time. And I literally said that to you the other day when I was channeling. So it just,
Yes.
but I think as women, we kind of move into that. Sometimes it's so interesting. Sometimes we're like, we'll just take care of it. It's fine. I'll just take care of it. I'll just do it. But
Yeah.
that's why it's so
And
beautiful to
getting
have.
bitter.
Yes, and getting bitter about it. That's why it's beautiful to have other women in your life, and why I'm so excited about the crone phase now and just meeting women in that phase. It's like, teach me, like, hold my hand. What do you know? And so that would be the other thing. Like, how cool would it be if we started to really just honor the older
Mm,
women in this world?
mm.
Like, it'd be so beautiful.
That, of course, makes me want to cry, because it is a difficult phase to walk into, because of the way that society values you
Yes.
in the past,
Yes.
and having to own that I'm not dead. It's far from that. I can focus more than I've ever focused before,
Hmm.
because I know more of myself, and I don't have the distractions anymore, and I don't have the cycles anymore, where and I love it when people tell me, oh, you still have your cycles, and they're still in their cycles and they haven't gone through menopause, and I laugh at it. It's like, your cycles are not the same, my friend. You do go through some emotional stuff, but it is never like it was when you have your period. um the cycles are still there in reflecting and saying, what am I pissed off about? Ooh, there it is. But it doesn't undertake me anymore like it used to.
Mm.
And that's why we call it the crone phase, because we can kind of like work through it without having the massive attachments to emotions that you're supposed to have, right? When you're in your flow. Like, that's the beauty of it. That's the coolness. And I really do appreciate that, Rebeka, because I really do find, and I know this is kind of off topic, but even having my hair go gray, I was excited about it, but there was such a mind fuckery
Hmm.
on am I sexy? And I thought, Jiminy Crickets, who gives a rat's ass? Like, but I've been so conditioned in that Barbie culture.
Yes.
I'm supposed to look a certain, and the comments I would get, both good and bad. Some women, oh, my husband would never let me. And I'm like, okay,
Ew.
well, that has a lot in it. It's like, well,
Right.
my husband doesn't like my gray hair. He doesn't think I look sexy. Oh, like, okay. Like, and again,
Wow.
conditioning. I know. And when you go gray, which is so silly, but when you go gray, sometimes people are like, it's confusing them. And so they tell you all about it. Cause then I'm thinking, oh, so your husband obviously doesn't like my gray hair. And then I think, okay, Michelle, again, That's not your perception. You're not,
Right.
go back into your innocence. It really doesn't fucking matter. But anyways, I bring that up. That really meant a lot. Like I just, for all the crones out there, let's fucking own it. Let's own that it is a phase that's really needed, because I think that phase kind of left because women of a certain age were always trying to still be beautiful,
Because
young. Let me
patriarchy.
say this. Yes, young, not beautiful. You're beautiful no matter what age you are, but being young, that has
Mhm.
been the centerfold. And when you
It
have
has
gray hair, all of
been.
a sudden you're not. Yeah, I know. It cracks me up.
This would be another whole amazing topic, patriarchy and women and everything. Because yeah, it's silly, but I'm
Yeah.
letting myself go gray and kind of excited about it. We'll see how I go as the process happens. My niece just asked me
And by the
yesterday.
way, oh, she did.
She's
What'd
like,
she
"Are you gonna
say?
dye your hair?" And I was like, "No, I'm good." She's like, "Yeah,
And here's the thing. Yeah, and I don't want anyone to think that if you color your hair, it's wrong. It's not. It's a personal preference,
totally,
right?
totally,
It's and I've had some friends that went gray and then they went back to coloring, because for some people it doesn't, their hair doesn't feel as good. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm just saying, doing it for yourself and not what the outside world tells you, which has mind fuckery in your head. Okay, done with that
totally,
topic. Sorry.
totally." Well,
All right, I think we finished.
thank you for this journey.
Thank you. This was really good. And until next time, you guys, just send you a lot of love and blessings. And as always, if you have any questions, please leave us in the comments. We'd love to assist you and help you out through any of these journeys that you're going through.
Absolutely. Any questions? Go ahead and give us a like and follow if you can. Helps us to reach more people. And we love y'all. See you next time.
Yes.